Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sensitive Podcast. I am your host, Kimball. I am a somatic leadership coach for highly sensitive and neurodivergent women in business. And we have a unusual episode for you today. I am actually not your host today. My former dear client and friend, Celeste Ruberti, is the host for today. And we're doing a flipping the tables, and she is actually interviewing me for today. So she has some really amazing things planned. And if you were ever curious about getting to know me more, the person behind this business, questions about my business, some more personal things, just feeling like you know me a bit more personally, this is the episode for you and the opportunity to dive in. So, without any further ado, I'm going to allow Celeste to introduce herself and to take it away with some questions.
Thank you so much, Kim. I feel so honored to be here, and I'm really excited that you invited me to do this. Partially because deep inside, I'm a little bit of a nosy person. I'll say nosy curiosity. I wouldn't totally look in your bathroom cabinet, but I would kind of want to look and see. So I feel like this interview today gives me a little bit of that chance to get to know you better as well. So thanks for the opportunity.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's dig in. I've got 1,000,010 questions, but there is only so much time. So, first thing I wanted to ask you, you call yourself a somatic coach, and that's something that's always felt a little nebulous to me because I understand what somatic means, but I feel like if I had come to you for coaching and heard that, I wouldn't have really known like what I was going to get out of it or how I should be thinking about that type of coaching. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, I love that. And it's also pointing to some things that I'm currently working on in my marketing, to be quite frank, because I do want people to make that automatic connection of like, what would I be getting out of this? And obviously, I am currently helping highly sensitive neurodivergent women in their businesses and specifically in running a business in a way that feels sustainable to them, in a way that feels like it honors their body, that it honors their nervous system, that it honors the way that they are made, their unique makeup, that they're no longer going to be a square peg trying to be shoved in a round hole, like a lot of us have been our entire lives. And so I think, the thing to be thinking about is that there will be this reconnection that happens with your body and with your energetic capacity is a lot of times the language that I like to use. I know that a lot of times people are just completely unaware of that because we get caught up in hustle culture, grind culture, capitalism, 9 to 5, productivity being a cog. The best way I know how to shorten it is to say that a lot of us have been attempted to be turned into machines, and I try to reconnect these highly sensitive and neurodivergent business owners with their humanity, with their body, with their own natural organic rhythm and pace, with their natural strengths, and help them try to find a way for their business to be sustainable and to thrive while not violating that natural pace and way of being.
That makes so much sense to me. I will never forget. I think it was maybe one of the first sessions I had with you where it just became clear to me that I showed up to the session out of breath. And I probably spent the first 10 minutes just trying to find ease in those moments of us being together. And then I realized I have not gone to the bathroom in hours, and I have to go so badly. And through working with you, I realized over time how many of those sensations I had shut down in my own body. And I had no idea how that was affecting everything else that I did in my life. So that completely makes sense. Now, on the other hand, I would describe myself 100% as neurodivergent, but I would not describe myself as a mom. So something I'm curious about with you is how has your business changed since you've become a mom and added a plus one to your family?
Gosh. The short answer is everything has changed because everything about me has changed. I think, having my son was the single most defining moment of my life. My husband and I were playing this game the other day. It was called Let's Get Deep, and it's one of those like card games where you ask each other. It has, kind of pre-formulated questions on it. And it was such an amazing question. I love powerful questions. And it was asking, like, if you could have a video of any one moment in your life, what would it be? And I answered my son's birth because there hasn't been any other moment in my life where I wasn't the same before and after that event. It's kind of this thing where you have an entirely new identity on the other side. So of course everything has to be different. But my business pretty much solely focused on one-on-one coaching prior to going out on my maternity leave. And I tend to do very deep work with folks, and it's what I love, and it's what I continue to love. And I'm so much more time limited now with the amount of time that I can spend on one calls. And so I really had to start rethinking my business model and what was going to work with me, with the amount of time limitations that I had, and also just my values shifting, quite frankly, of wanting to really be there, most especially for my son's first 3 years are really, really important to me. To be his primary caregiver, to be the primary one who is with him, as much as I can be, while obviously maintaining a sense of self and things that are important to me as well. Um, and so from that place, the sanctuary was born, which is my membership. And so I started to get into, yes, I still had some one on one coaching clients, but more so doing kind of a group membership situation. And now I'm in the process as well of coming up with I'm really, really, really excited for this, but my next offering is going to be a high touch group mastermind that's going to be capped at like 10 to 12 participants. And it's the name of it is the Sustainable Business Success Mastermind. Um, and so I feel like this is such a beautiful way to meld my strengths of really being able to go deep with a smaller, more intimate group, and still being able to give my gifts to more people than what I would have time to do one on one. So it really has been. My son just turned 2. It has been a whole, what has felt like 2 years of experimenting and finding, okay, what's going to work for me in this season? What's going to work for my clients to still give the level of depth of support that I really want? And what's going to work for my family and finding a way to balance those needs. Yeah.
So I think something that's always really impressed me about you is that since I've known you, which I feel like is maybe been about 3-ish years now, give or take a little. I've seen your business morph and change as you have changed. Your life has evolved as well, and I think that that's been beautiful to witness from this side for the limited amount of time that I've known you. I'm also curious, what historical experiences or what brought you to becoming a coach in the first place? Because I assume there's something that inspired you or there's something about who you are as a person. So what kind of got you into this path?
Mm. Yeah, I love that question. So I'm thinking of how long of a rabbit trail to take on this one, but I'm gonna go pretty in depth here because I don't think this is ever something that I have shared, maybe kind of like the full story, much less on one of my own platforms. So growing up, I think I can look back and realize and recognize that I've always been more artistic than I have been scientific. And what I mean specifically by that is I have always been someone where I can listen to a song or um, read a poem or see a work of art and just burst into tears and just feel things very, very deeply. I mean, hello, hi, highly sensitive person, neurodivergent person. This is just kind of comes along with the territory, right? Um, and so, but my parents were always kind of, and I know like this was coming from such a good place, but they were always like, those things are hobbies. And you need to choose something where you know you're always going to be able to safely make money at. And so while the arcs that I just described were really the things that made my soul sing, they were always more so like those things are hobbies and you're really good at math and science. And I did have a strong interest in anatomy and physiology and things of that nature. And I was gifted in that area. And so there was always kind of this natural push to be in healthcare because that's this safe route that you know you can always have a job in, you can always make good money at. And so I kind of felt funneled to the healthcare route. And I originally thought I was going to be a nurse and then a doctor. I ruled both of those things out. Then I thought athletic training. And then I finally settled on physical therapy and I went the distance with that career. I ended up getting my doctorate in physical therapy. And it was after practicing physical therapy for 7 years full time, to make a long story short, that I started experiencing really severe symptoms of burnout. I'm talking, severe health symptoms. Really, I was looking at taking long-term disability. I was so exhausted. I would come home from work and couldn't do anything except for lay on the couch and watch Netflix. I didn't have anything to give socially or emotionally to anyone else. I kept on waiting to love it because I had spent so much time and money and to be in this career, and yet it just never really felt like it fit me. It didn't feel like it was something. And this was despite so many people telling me all the time how good I was at my career, how amazing I was at it, how much of a blessing it was that I had my education, I could help them in this way. And I kept on thinking in my mind, then how much better could I be at something that I was actually like really wanted to do? That's what I kept on thinking when these people would tell me this in my head. So my health symptoms and my mental distress about it all eventually reached a point where I just couldn't anymore. And I decided to quit my job with no backup anything. I didn't have anything else lined up. And I backpacked around the world by myself for 4 months. I started in Iceland. I crashed my rental car in a glacier in Iceland to start out, which ended up being 10,000 euro on my credit card to replace a whole new car. And that's how my trip started out. And then I ended in Myanmar, and I went to 9 countries in between. And during that time, I know it sounds like a lovely, like, eat, pray, love journey, but it was quite intense and a lot of soul searching involved of figuring out, okay, what do I want to do? What am I really best equipped to do with my giftings? And that's how the idea for Kimball coaching was born. That's where it came from, is that really intense soul searching time. And kind of a deeper layer to your question that I want to answer, other than just this journey of like a job that didn't fit and then finding one that did, is I think what set me up for this being the thing that I'm here for is trauma. Because I learned to hold space for people at a very, very young age. I was a parentified child and I held space for family members from the time that I was 9 years old onward. And so it's something that I learned out of necessity. It's something that I got really, really good at out of necessity. And so a lot of times, that trauma ends up turning into a huge gift for other people. And um, you know, I could spend time resisting and saying, like, I don't want to do it because this is from a trauma response. It's like, yes, and it's also something that feeds me at this point and that I really enjoy and can end up being a wonderful gift from other people to other people as well. So I did want to address that other part to the question too.
Thank you for adding that part because I think it's something that I've personally always kind of thought about whenever I've seen anyone who's been in a helping profession. I always think, wow, how are you able to, I'll use that term, hold space for me when I'm at my worst, or even when I feel like I'm triggering or I'm I'm sort of in an unsafe space right now and I need your help, but I'm coming to you in this space or in this mentality that doesn't feel good and I'm asking you for help on that. I always wonder how people in those professions are able to either to be present with that and not let it affect themselves, or even be in a space where they think I'm sort of born for this and I know how to do both things to be there for you in this moment and know that I've experienced that side of it and have been there too.
Yeah.
Um so one thing I wanted to touch back on that really struck me, and I thought, oh gosh, we all go through this. Typically when we grow up with parents in this culture, we are taught that we have to get a good job and we have to make money and we have to support ourselves. And those things are true. We're also then usually given kind of very a set few paths that can do that. We have kids who are like, I'm going to be a doctor or fireman or something like that. Sometimes artists, but always when we get towards the end of our schooling, it's like, well, what are you going to do to make money? And I I don't know anyone who has said to their kids, focus. You could think about coaching or something. And also, we likely have to have some life experience to go through that. So now that you're here and you found this, now you have to make money from it. So I'm curious, because all businesses involve selling, how do you view the selling aspect of your business while you're also helping people? Like just that part about you have to make money and the charging part of it. And answer it however you like.
Yeah. I think I view selling as serving, and I view it as helping. And and I very much take a pretty hands-off approach, I would say, to quote unquote selling, in that it's very much just this exchange of, this is what I have to offer. Does it resonate with you? Is this something you need help with? Great. Then I can help. And if that exchange feels good to somebody, then we can talk. And um I am I take such a, and not that I can't always get better. So I want to caveat with that, but being ethical in my business is one of my highest values. And so I try to approach sales from a very ethical place. In other words, I try not to use any sense of false urgency. I am not going to use FOMO or try to poke pain points or things like that to try to get people to buy something that they don't need. In fact, I try to do the exact opposite of, I try to slow down sales. I try to check in with people. Is this really what you need? Is this really going to fulfill what you need help with right now? Am I the best person to fulfill this need? And if they're telling me something that I know I'm not the best person, I will tell them that and I will refer them out, right? So all of that is really important to me. So it makes selling feel not icky to me, and it just feels like a pure service. And the other thing that I do is that I always want to work with someone and have them have experience working with me. So both ways, I want to experience what it's like to work with them, and I want them to experience what it's like to work with me, before having any conversation of, are we right for each other? Because otherwise, how can we know? I think it's kind of preposterous for people to sign up for coaching packages that are long term and thousands of dollars without ever experiencing the person's coaching. Like, how are you supposed to make a decision like that?
Yeah.
Because every person has unique gifts, and there can be absolutely nothing wrong with either of you, and it's just not a fit, and you need to know that before you invest any money. So all of those things to me just make me feel like when I'm offering anything, it's just this invitation, is what I would say, an invitation of, this is what I have to offer, and do you want that? And if you do, great. We can have a no pressure chat of what that would be like.
I love that. And from my side, that's completely the experience I felt from you. And I think it was that sort of ease around the transparency and you not needing it to work out and you not needing it to be a fit, but you actually seeing if it was going to be a fit for me and for you that made me trust that process even more.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah, you're. I have many good things to say about Kim Kimball.
Thank you.
That being said, as a past client of yours, I came to you where I was in incredible burnout. I found myself crying on my office floor at 3 in the morning, 2 weeks before Christmas, wrapping 10 million presents and wondering where my life went. And at that point, I didn't really know what the answer was. I just knew that everything was broken. And so one thing I'm wondering is now that I think your focus is still similar to when we met, but now it seems to be more tied to women who have businesses. And I'm sure when they're coming to you, and even when I was, there's always something we're looking to solve for. So something I was curious about is how do you approach the idea of a solution in coaching? Because I'm assuming it's not always possible to have a concrete solution. And I'm just wondering how you kind of look at that of like end goals or things like that.
I love that question. I'm closing my eyes for a moment, just even thinking about it, because I think this question is so dear to me. And I think it's something that I do quite differently than a lot of people in the industry. Meaning, I think a lot of life coaching is geared towards outcomes and geared towards helping you hit these goals. And most of my coaching, while it's not like I'm saying outcomes aren't important or goals aren't important, but I'm much more process what we would call a process-based coach, meaning being able to be with you in the process of reaching those goals or reaching those outcomes. And who are you being in the midst of that, right?
Mhm.
Um, that's where all the juice is for me. That's where all of the change really happens. And a lot of what makes me different in coaching as well that I just want to name here when you're talking about, okay, how do you grapple with outcomes and people wanting an outcome when they come to you and not being able to promise them, let's say, um, is exactly in really getting into the relationship with yourself in the midst of all of it. So for example, if someone it's something that I will name if somebody is like, I just need to hit a 10K month or like I just need to be able to hit this visibility goal or whatever. It's like, okay, well, who are you without that? What are you afraid of if that doesn't happen? Um or like what is your relationship to uncertainty? That we can't control a specific outcome. Like these are where things get really, really juicy. And when we ask ourselves those questions in the midst of seeking those outcomes, then we can start relating to ourselves in a different way. And for me, that leads to a lot more self acceptance instead of this rigid, like self flagellation of like, I've got to reach this goal or else I'm not worthy or else, I failed or whatever, fill in the blank. Um, and ironically, when we reach more of that place of self acceptance, that's when the goals come easily. And so it's kind of this paradoxical situation of I will never discredit the goals and I won't say that those aren't worthwhile things of pursuing. And I'm much more concerned with all of this stuff that comes up in the interim as I'm helping you in the process to reach them and really, really helping you dig into that.
I love that. I was getting goosebumps listening to you talk because I'm going through some stuff right now where I have like an end goal and I all of a sudden the other day I just realized I'm like, oh, this thing that I'm tied to, it's not part of the past at all. Like it's a thing, but it's just like one like little milestone that may or may not actually be important towards the grander thing that I'm aiming for. And I just think like what you said around uh like sort of digging a little bit deeper and like looking at like what the fears are kind of behind that or around reaching that and just like looking at that more closely. That really stuck with me. I hope it resonates for other folks too.
Well,
Um,
I think that people don't often we can have this end goal in mind,
mhm.
and oftentimes we don't come up for error long enough in pursuit of those goals to even recognize what you're sharing, Celeste, of like, actually, this isn't even an important thing, or this isn't even what I actually really want.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the most typical thing with that is like, oh, I got married, I have the job, I have 2.5 kids, I've got the white picket fence, and I'm still empty. Then what? Right? Like that's the most typical example of that. But it and with my people, it can be I reached the 10K months, I'm still unhappy. Now what? Or I reached XYZ career goal, I reached this thing. Like it's because we didn't come up for air long enough and ask the deeper questions like I'm talking about in the midst of the process to realize there was actually something deeper going on underneath, right? So, yeah, just want to name that.
Yeah. Love that. Okay, I want to hit on some slightly lighter things that email solving great, just like a couple little things. And I was like, I'm just curious about some of this stuff. So, your emails are beautiful. I love subscribing to your email list. They feel aesthetically calming and introspective and also easy to digest, but they're also meaty because it's clear you put a lot of work and effort and thought into the content that you share in them. And I just find them to be thought provoking. Whenever I see one, I'm like, ooh, I'm going to sit down with this and really enjoy it. That aside, I find the photos to be really beautiful. So I was just curious, do you take the photos yourself? Are they of your space? Where do they come from?
I have used some of my photos in the past in them, not commonly, I will say, but I did share I wanted to be a photographer, and so like photography is my primary medium that speaks to me and speaks to my heart. I love it so much. So that's probably why things look aesthetically pleasing, and it speaks to my heart so much that you feel that way. So I appreciate you expressing that. And I also learned with a practitioner recently, we were talking about like my sensory profile, and in some of the things that she was sharing, she was like, it sounds like you are very tuned in and impacted by visual stimulus. And I had never realized that. To realize, like, for example, my husband has ADHD, and has a tendency to just kind of leave things about and not be conscious and aware of it. And that really impacts me of making me feel very overstimulated. And I didn't realize that the flip side of it is connected to it, of like a calming visual space
Hmm.
pours into me and makes me feel really calm, really grounded, really present, but that all of that is speaking to my sensory needs of that I am very impacted by visual stimulus. So that's probably coming across in those emails, I guess is what I'm saying. But the photos that are not mine, which is most of them, just come from Pexels, which is it's Pexels, which is just stock photos. So I will like input calming photos and find ones that resonate with me.
Your emails as a whole are gorgeous, but I will say the photos definitely just they make me feel something alongside what you're already writing. So I think the whole medium for you is beautiful and very expressive.
Thank you.
Of course. I'm curious, I imagine coaching to be something where it's like, "Ooh, we're going to get into something now." But I want to know what, and maybe this is also it, but what energizes you about your work? And maybe there's a lot of things, but what really like lifts you up and gets you excited about it?
Mm, I love that question. It my knee jerk reaction is to say everything. But I will share that, for example, when I was doing physical therapy, it is something that felt like it was taking from me.
Mm,
It felt like it was draining me. It felt like the energy was coming out of me. And anytime I'm holding a coaching session, I can have been having a very challenging day beforehand personally for whatever reason. And if I go into a session and I'm holding space for another person, I feel like it gives me energy. It gives me life. I will come off a call and I will feel uplifted and better afterwards. Which I know is not the case for everyone. Like a lot of people are like, how do you hold space for this like challenging stuff? Or, it's not always challenging, but oftentimes it is. And like, man, that would really like weigh me down. And I'm like, no, it lifts me up. So just the act of seeing someone, like really seeing someone. I don't just mean visually, like I'm looking at you, Celeste, right now. I mean seeing somebody's being, like being with somebody's soul and having the honor and the privilege of reflecting that goodness back to somebody and areas that they may not be seeing it for themselves feels like such an immense privilege. Um, and it energizes me to kind of see people in their wholeness in this way because I think people forget that about themselves. And I like to be able to see that and mirror and reflect it back. So that's the first thing. And then just being able to have people come to realizations about themselves, about how they're being in the world, about who they actually are underneath all of the, societal expectations or whatever masks that we have put on over the years, helping them come to a place of more authenticity, of more truth within themselves, that will never, ever, ever get old to me. Um, so I would say a common, there's lots of things, but they're probably all some variation of those two things.
I would think in a way too, this is just more of a side note, that when you were saying these are the things that lift you up, that you feel energized by, that's also kind of a somatic somatic idea, right? To know that your body
Yes.
feels a certain way when you do a certain thing. And I think that's something we're not always entirely clued into, other than knowing that we sometimes feel drained or exhausted, but not really tying it to this thing and this action feels good to me, and like honoring that and experiencing it and enjoying it as well.
A
Um,
1000%. Yes.
the flip side of this that I want to know is what drains you about your business.
Hmm. Um, Social media is the most definitive answer to that. Um, and not in the way of like I am not somebody who naturally gravitates towards comparison. It's not like to toot my own horn or to be braggadocious or anything like that. It's just truly never something that I have struggled with. So it's not that I go on social media and I'm like comparing my business to somebody else's business or my life to somebody else's Instagram perfect life. I am very well aware of, what gets shared on social media as the highlight reel. And it's not that. It's more so from me being a highly sensitive and neurodivergent standpoint, the standpoint of it being a lot for me to consume
Yeah.
and it being overly stimulating for me. And I'll give you an example of there was one day that I was like scrolling on Facebook before bed and something about the genocide in Gaza came up and I saw a clip and I was crying for like 30 minutes afterwards. And my husband came into the room and he was like, "What just happened?" And I was like, "I saw this clip and I just like I can't unsee it. Like my mind is one that is so sensitive to things like this that I latch on to things very, very easily. And it really impacts me. And so I need to have kind of fierce protective boundaries around my energy and what things I consume because it is so impactful for me. Like I can remember stories that I've heard or things that I've seen from when I was 3 years old, and that's just the way my mind works. And so, from that standpoint, I have to be very mindful of like, yes, I need to be on. It's a privilege to be on social media and to be able to reach people all over the world and to be able to come in contact with people. I have clients in Australia. It's like, okay, you're in a different day than me. How cool is this, right? It's amazing. I talked to my brother-in-law yesterday who's in Asia. Like all this stuff is so cool. And also I need to be mindful of what it does to my energy and really checking in of like, is this how I want to be spending my time? And I've gravitated more towards SEO type practices for my marketing, especially since I've had my son, just for when I really check in with myself for some of these reasons.
Mhm. I love that. Totally get that on the social media. I'm sure there will be a lot of people who um, uh, are on the exact same page. One last question I have for you about your business specifically before I start to ask you some questions about who you are as a human, maybe away from the business. I'm just wondering what successes that some of your clients have seen as they've worked with you, as much as you feel comfortable to share. I'm I would assume, not knowing exactly what your business looks like right now, that you're supporting women to grow their own businesses, and I would assume that maybe they're looking to get more clients, get more followers, make more money. But I'm sure that there are other things and other little steps that they're hitting that have maybe been even more impactful along the way. So I'm just curious what's really resonated for you.
Yeah. So I kind of look at my business as having two sort of branches. So as I said, primarily I'm helping highly sensitive neurodivergent women have sustainable businesses. And that to me has two different branches of number one, how you're working. And what I mean by that is really helping people start to take aligned action. So, looking at the places where they are having resistance, procrastination, self sabotage, where they're playing small, where there's fear of being seen, people pleasing, and that all of these things can crop up very differently at different point perfectionism as well at different points in their business. So for example, if somebody is more at the beginning stage of their business, really at any stage, there can be this fear of visibility, this fear of growth, of like, oh my gosh, my post just went viral and now I've got 10,000 views on this thing and 10,000 people commenting and making criticism about my work and like, right? These are things again, like in our normal human bodies, this wouldn't have been a normal human thing, right? And this is the times that we're living in, and we have to be able to, our nervous systems have to be able to hold this in order to expand in our businesses. So I would say that's the first part that I really help folks with. And, so being able to work and take aligned action in all of these ways so that the actual working on your business part feels like there's a lot less resistance, a lot more easeful, a lot more partnering with yourself versus feeling like you're forcing yourself or you're needing to hustle or you're having to work against, your natural makeup. And then the second part does more with that natural makeup part of like figuring out ways to run your business that actually works for how your brain works, for how you naturally are made. So, for example, for me at this time in my life, in this season of my life, coming up with a business model that works for me, also doing lots of things asynchronously versus needing to be live on a call at a specific time, which is challenging for me because anytime I do that, I have to have nanny care or my husband has to be home, right? So being able to do things asynchronously can really, really help. But I find that a lot of times what happens is people come to me and they're highly sensitive, they're neurodivergent, and they've been consuming, again, we're back to that consuming, all of this neurotypical business advice. And then they're like, why isn't my business working? They're like, well, it's because you've been trying to do things in a neurotypical way that doesn't work for you. It doesn't work for you. It doesn't work for your brain. It doesn't work for your capacity. And then they haven't even thought outside of the box a little bit. For example, of what I just said of like, oh, I can do this asynchronously. Oh, I can switch to this type of business model. Oh, I don't have to do it this way. And it's like shedding all of these layers of everything that we've been taught we have to do or should do in business. So yeah, that's a little bit of the outcomes I typically see with folks.
Oh my gosh. Everything you just said, I think, I mean, so many of those things that you touched upon around challenges that you address with clients, I, I'm sure that that is going to resonate with a lot of people who listen to this today. I know just at a baseline level of like people pleasing or perfectionism. I think we all experience that, but also I can just imagine how debilitating it can be when trying to build a business and really put yourself out there. But everything you were explaining just made me feel like, oh, if I were to start a business, having that kind of coaching, I could see how it would be so beneficial to remove a lot of those blockers, or at least to become aware of them and how they become things that sabotage me that I can probably let go.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yes.
So, with that, I'd love to ask you some questions that are more about you, but of course, feel free to take them from the point of view of your business because it's so intertwined in your life, I'm sure. Uh,
Absolutely.
so, I'd love to know what's something interesting that you recently learned?
Mm, something interesting that I've recently learned. Gosh, I'm kind of drawing a blank.
You could put
I
on it if it comes back to you, that could be okay too.
I feel like I have recently learned about um PDA in autism, pathological demand avoidance,
Oh, I
and
didn't know
how
that's what that stood for. I was thinking of a
yes,
old school public display of affection. So,
yes,
say that again.
PDA and autism, and just how it really is coming from this root of anxiety. And that comes out as this demanding, controlling, um, and I still have a lot more that I want to learn about it. But I feel like I am deep diving more and more in that land of like PDA, different understanding of that and really how to work with it. So yeah, I would say that's the last cool thing I've learned.
Can you say what the acronym is again and what it means?
Yes. Um, my brain literally just forgot it too. This is my this is my mom brain. Pathological demand avoidance. Yeah. Okay.
And what does that mean again exactly?
It essentially means that there is this internal anxiety that comes out as making lots of demands, and being very controlling and avoiding another person making requests and demands of you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to be Googling this afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'm also wondering, are there any life hacks that you have or things that you do regularly where you're like, I know about this thing. I do this thing and it works great for me. And it's either saved you time or it makes things simpler or less expensive or more pleasant for you.
Mm. I would say the biggest thing for me is really tuning into my senses.
Mm.
I'm specifically speaking towards the like making things more pleasant. So let's say, for example, it's like I've got a hot cup of lemon water in the morning. It's like, okay, can I feel the heat on my hands? Can I see the steam vapor coming out of it? Can I anchor into the smell of it? Like anchoring into my senses consistently throughout the day to bring presence. That brings presence for me. It brings me in the now. As somebody who has a brain that has been impacted by complex trauma, my mind always wants to go to the past or the future as a protective mechanism. And so it's very challenging for me to be in the now. And it's a very conscious practice that I have to do. And so being able to anchor into my senses really helps me do that.
Ooh. As you were talking about that, I was thinking, is that something that I'm good at? And I thought, sometimes, but that I think through that lens of what you were saying, which feels common to me at least, of always going to the past or the future. I don't think I've even, it's so automatic that I don't even recognize it. But as I'm now thinking about it in relation to being in the moment and anchoring in, it makes total sense how that could be a new strategy I could work on employing.
Yeah, and it's so simple, it doesn't require a lot, and that is really necessary for me in this season, I
Yeah.
have a busy toddler running around. I don't Like, I'm not going to give you a long list of, if you're asking me what I do not have a long morning practice at this point in time in my life. I'm not sitting down, like, journaling for an hour and, whatever else. I wake up to my kids screaming and my feet, hit the ground running and I'm off for the day. And so it's learning how to anchor into these little moments and presence that really helps me the most.
For sure. Okay. I'm curious about your shadow side a little bit. So are there any like turnoffs for you or things that just set you off or get you angry or anything like that?
Oh, there are plenty. Yes. My biggest turnoff is inauthenticity and lack of integrity,
Mm-hmm.
lack of character. Huge turnoff for me. Cannot. And I recognize that is because integrity is one of my highest values, and not everybody holds that value. But I'm just being real. That is a really, really big one for me. Huge turnoff. I will never choose to work with or likely have someone in my inner circle who is inauthentic and struggles with integrity. Um, and as far as anger, gosh, I feel like I've always been like keenly aware of power dynamics in like a really weird way ever since I was very little. I'm talking like a bug would get hurt or harmed, and I would be very upset about that. Like hyper empathetic, maybe is the word that I would use of like, but I was always very aware of the power dynamic of that, of like, I'm bigger than this tiny bug and it's my job to protect this tiny bug. Or even with puppies, when we were growing up, we would have puppies at the house or like little baby kittens or something. And it was always like, okay, it's my job to care for this thing. And so I'm always very angered at injustices or um, things where somebody exploits a power dynamic is the best way to say it. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Okay. This question feels a little weird to ask, but I'll sort of couch it a little bit. So I'm curious what's something about you that you think is weird, strange, or different. And from the world of neurodivergence, usually we can look at ourselves and say, there's 10 million things that I do and I'm fine with all of them. But if you can think of one or two things where you're like pretty definitely sure the rest of the world doesn't operate this way or do these one or two things.
Mm. Yeah, like you said, since I'm neurodivergent, there is probably a million, but I think the thing that I want to share with that is that I have had to work so hard to view these things for me, for my own mental health, as neutral, as like biological facts of this is just how I'm wired and there's not some sort of moral failing that I am different in this way. So I just want to kind of preface the question with that. But I think from the outside looking in, the things that maybe other people would think are weird or different about me is just I have some pretty big sensory differences in the way that I process sensory information. And so that will look like, my husband and I have never slept in the same bed. Cannot do it, will not do it. It's not even on the table. We just went on a cruise a couple weeks ago and we actually slept in the same bed because, if we didn't, we would be having to pay for two different rooms. Um, and that's the only time it's ever going to happen because, unless I'm in a situation like that where it's absolutely mandated, it's just not, it's not pleasant. It doesn't work well. Why am I going to force myself to do something? I am highly triggered by the sound of breathing or snoring, and my husband snores like a freight train. I just cannot do it. And I know that for, most people are like, oh, well, everybody's bothered by snoring. Well, it's like panic attack level for me. It's not a kind of like, oh, normal bothered by snoring type of a situation. And so the fact that we sleep in separate rooms in order to accommodate those sensory differences for me, I think most people will be like, oh, that's terrible. You're depriving your husband. Like, this is a terrible thing. And I'm like, this is what works for us. And I would like to get sleep and be a pleasant person. So get over it. This isn't your life and this is fine. So I would say that, and there's a lot of sensory things that I do that at this point in time, like you were saying, Celeste, I'm not even conscious of doing them. Like sometimes I am. Like I'll go to bed at night and I recognize that I am fiddling and like moving around with like my shirt that I'm wearing because I can't have any wrinkles. Like what what I am wearing can't have wrinkles against like my bed sheets or whatever, or that my bed sheets can't have wrinkles in them, or um like everything needs to sensory wise be just so that is touching my body for me to fall asleep. Um, so I would say those are the main things that come to mind, just some of those sensory differences.
I love those. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Um, you've mentioned before that you've struggled with infertility, and I was wondering, what that experience has been like for you and just being on that journey, and um, how do you manage hope and feeling hopeful but not too hopeful and tempering expectations, and how far were you willing to go on that journey?
Yeah. Um, so I got married when I was 35, and I had always wanted to be a mom my entire life. I always had like a very strong maternal instinct, always had in my mind that I wanted to be a mother. It was something that really was kind of one of those non-negotiables for me. So my husband and and my husband was the same, like always wanted to be a parent. And so we started trying pretty immediately after we got married, like 6 months after we got married. And I was just expecting like, okay, like you start trying and then maybe it's going to take like 6 months or something or a year, but you'll get pregnant eventually. And 4 years passed and nothing. Um, and when I say that I tried everything, I mean I tried everything. I'm talking, I did a diet of just beans for like 2 years or something. I don't even know. I did every like natural holistic treatment. I went to a million different naturopaths. I read every toxic product from my house, including cleaning products, makeup, worked on internal mindset, stress. Like there was no stone I did not turn. And I don't know how many thousands of dollars I spent, but it was many, because I was very holistically and naturally minded of not wanting to go the IVF route, and just knowing that that would take a toll on my physical and mental health, and not really wanting to put my body through that. And so anyway, I kind of took that to its furthest extent that I possibly could. And it finally got to the point where I had a conversation with my husband and I was like, I just don't think this is going to happen for us in this way. And are we willing to do IVF? Is this something that we want to do? Is this important enough to us of a thing that we want that this is what we're willing to do in order to get it? Um, and both of us kind of had this thing where we imagined like when we're 80 years old and sitting around like a Christmas dinner table, do we want it to be just us? And for us, the answer was no to that question. And so we're like, well, in order to do that, like we're willing to do the IVF process. And so that was really insanely hard for me because it grated against some of my values. Like I had to let go of some of my values in order to move towards what was the higher value for me in this moment, which was becoming a mother. But I had to let go of a lot of my natural minded, least invasive type mindsets and go for the most invasive. And that process was really hard on my body and my emotions. I experienced a lot of depression from the medications. It was very hard to do all of the injections. My body didn't handle the egg retrieval well, amongst other things, but thankfully did one round of egg retrievals, got the eggs that we needed, did the first transfer, and on the first transfer, my son stuck. And so thankfully, it was the first round of everything, and we were able to get pregnant on the first round, which I'm very grateful for because I have many friends who've had to go through many rounds, and I can't even imagine that. So yeah, I think the furthest extent that we were willing to go is exactly what we did and ended up having to do. Yeah.
Amazing. Oh my gosh. Um, I have not ran this question by you, but I want to ask, and of course you can answer that. But do you want to try for another child?
I would love to. We have one more egg left, and so um there is no trying really involved. There is a doctor's appointment involved where it's like, "Hey, let's do the second transfer." And of course, we could try, quote unquote, try for another one, but I just haven't felt comfortable doing that with my age. I'm 42, and just the risk for genetic abnormalities and things like that being higher at my age. I would rather have an embryo that is tested, that I know is genetically normal. So that's been my mindset behind that one. So, and I was actually anticipating doing the second transfer at 8 months postpartum after I had my son, just knowing my age and sort of what I wanted to do there. And knowing that both my husband and myself wanted more than one child, and my son, Zayden, has just been so challenging that every time I check in with myself, I'm like, nope, it's gonna have to wait a little bit longer. So I just keep on checking in with my body, and I hope that it ends up that there is space and capacity to have one more. That would be lovely. But as of now, when I've checked in with myself, it's been a not yet.
And I'd love to know a little bit more about Zayden. How many months is he now? What is he interested in? What does his progress of life look like? And also you being a mom to him.
Mm. He just turned 2, if you can believe that. Hard to believe. It feels like simultaneously yesterday and forever all rolled into one. And the thing that I would share about my son is that everyone that contacts him, including myself, just says that he has such a sweet disposition. Like when you're with him for any period of time, he's just so sweet. I don't know how to describe him any other way than that. He's very considerate, he's very kind. He's like crazy aware of emotions for 2 years old. um he will look at me and be like frustrated or angry, and he'll like tell me when he's these things, and know what to do and how to ask for help, and how to move through some of these things. I'm like, wow, this is like a crazy amount of emotional awareness for your age, and I'm very proud of that. um and he's just, like I said, he's very concerned if he sees that I'm sad or if daddy's sad, like very empathetic, very kind, sweet-natured boy. And he is very into trucks, loves trucks, loves airplanes, things that go in general, loves them, has a train that we just got for his birthday that he loves. So any things that go, he loves. He loves being outside, playing soccer, just a very happy, like joyful, exuberant personality.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
And one last question, sort of ending on a note of joy and what life looks like. In this life, hopefully, we're continuing to learn and grow. And so I was just wondering, in what ways do you feel like you're still learning? And I know there's all different areas and aspects, but what areas of growth do you feel like you're going through right now that feel most prominent for you?
Yeah. I hope that I'm still learning in all of the ways. That is one of my hugest values, is personal growth, for that to just be an ongoing and continuous journey. But I think the main way that I am growing right now, is an acceptance. Is
Mm.
just not only in self acceptance, which is always probably my number one, but also just in accepting reality as it is, accepting other people as they are, um, not needing reality, others, myself to be different than what they are. And I think that there is so much freedom in that, especially as someone who has that natural inclination towards personal growth, which can cross over a lot of the times for me into fixing or optimizing or needing things to be different than what they are in order to be content. And I'm finding so much freedom now. I feel like this has been sort of a switch over in my 40s. of acceptance and knowing that that doesn't mean giving up and that doesn't mean rolling over. It doesn't mean not pursuing the things that are important to me. It just means I'm no longer trying to control the uncontrollable. It means I'm no longer fighting with reality. It means I'm no longer wasting my energy on the stuff that is outside of the locus of my control. And that feels so profoundly freeing. So,
Mm, so beautiful. I think we will take that gift and end it on that. Kim, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to ask you these questions and learn more about you and you being so open and willing to share so much about yourself. I think it just speaks to you as both a coach who runs her own business and also just as a human. And it's one of the many reasons I love you. So thank you so much for today.
thank you so much for these wonderful, juicy questions and for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.